Well, thank you very much, J. Paul, not just for that for the kind invitation and for the very kind introduction, but also for your partnership and your leadership as we've worked together and gotten to know each other and collaborate in roughly the same amount of time, because we both started these roles, at about the same time, about 14 months ago in my case, anyway. In these 14 months, it's been for me an extraordinary learning opportunity and a collaboration opportunity with chambers of commerce and boards of trade right across Ontario, who are members, of course, of the Ontario Chamber. So, this is a community that doesn't just represent small business, it doesn't just represent big business, it represents all business in every sector of the economy, every community in Ontario. And it's been quite a privilege and a learning experience, because I've now made 44 visits to chambers of commerce and boards of trade across the province. And at every single stop, I've been just so inspired by the sort of thing we're seeing right here in this room, right here, right now, today. And that's collaboration with different orders of government, with the municipal level, with the provincial level. You could see Minister Jones here, with the federal level and other MPPs, with the federal level, with the police force, right, with the region, with local councillors and mayors. And so all of these partners working with business, it's so critical to the progress that we make together. And so right now, we couldn't have a more fitting time to have these conversations about the future, because obviously this is a week where the trade and tariff uncertainty continues to threaten businesses and workers and communities right across the province, right across the country, and I would actually say across the continent and the whole world, right? This is a conversation that's happening not just here, but in every single one of our major trading partners all over the world. And I actually think that this makes the work that we do together particularly important, particularly urgent, and particularly impactful, right? And right here in Brampton, in Peel, this incredibly fast-growing city and region, this area here is, of course, known and central to Canada's economic strategy and its future, whether it's advanced manufacturing, logistics, life sciences, technology, or whether it's because of the extraordinary diversity that this community enjoys. And I was so pleased to see Gary Kent's remarks. Where's Gary gone? Over there. Oh, there he is. Thank you for remaining committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is so critical that we make that commitment right now. If there's any competitive advantage we have, that is one of them, right? And this idea that we should all back away because the United States happened to vote 49% to 48% for one candidate, that all of a sudden this stuff, these commitments that we've made, all of a sudden don't matter, and that it's no longer Canada's competitive advantage, that would be the biggest mistake we could possibly make. So thank you for that. You understand in this community, in this region, you understand the stakes like so few others do. And the Brampton Board of Trade and the Caledon Chamber of Commerce and the other chambers and boards of the region have been such critical partners in helping us at the Ontario Chamber understand the challenges and also be strong advocates for the solutions. So let's talk about where we are today. And I don't mean, this beautiful hall, enjoying this beautiful lunch. I mean, as business people, as Canadian citizens, as global citizens, in a world that seems less stable than at any time that I can remember in my lifetime, since the Cold War, that is anyway, less able to agree on our problems, less capable of working together across the global community to solve those problems. I mean, think about the last 3 months. Going into the year, we knew that we would certainly see a federal election. We knew we would likely see a provincial election. And we knew there'd be some sort of madness because of the new occupant in the White House. Now, all three of those things happened within the first 3 months of the year. We saw a US president begin his term in office not targeting Russia, not targeting China, not targeting any of America's great rivals in the world, but instead targeting Canada, America's closest friend and partner. And it's interesting watching this, and I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about, kind of how I see the situation, because the rationale for the tariffs and the threats to our trading relationship, which matters so much. We heard from Gary Kent that 39% of the GDP of this region depends on trade. That's a lot of businesses. That's a lot of jobs. And the rationale for it changes every single day. So first we heard it was about fentanyl and migrants and border security, which is of course preposterous. The idea that, the flow of any of those things going north to south is a bigger problem than the flow going south to north, it's utterly preposterous. It's an excuse because the White House doesn't have the ability to impose tariffs otherwise. And I'm so grateful to see today and tomorrow, there's going to be dialogue in the, probably very intense dialogue and a vote in the US Senate where you now have bipartisan support for the first time. It may not be enough to pass, but to say we cannot be threatening Canada in this way, and that trade to Canada matters, and that the reasons for these tariffs makes absolutely no sense. But anyway, sometimes that's the rationale. Sometimes the president alleges that the US is subsidizing Canada. Now, of course, when he said this the first time, we all went for our calculators and we started going to Google and trying to understand, where does this claim come from, right? Well, it turns out there's no subsidy, there's just a trade deficit. In other words, America producing less than it consumes. So this is like me going down to A1 Samosas, here in Brampton, ordering 20 samosas and then going out and doing a press conference and saying, we've been subsidizing the samosa industry for too long. Mr. Samosa has been treating us very badly, right? That's what it's like. That's what it's like. It's really preposterous. And so sometimes it's about Canada becoming the 51st state, right? A claim or an aspiration that is utterly crazy, but it is both united Canadians and it's embarrassed Americans. More seriously, there's a view among many Americans that this is about bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. But here's the problem. This idea shouldn't be out of 2025, this should be out of 1925, right? It is an early 20th century fantasy in a global economy where the standard of living that Canadians and Americans and so many other people who are fortunate enough to live in developed countries, the standard of living that we enjoy, it's based not on national economies, it's based on global ecosystems, where you have all sorts of suppliers and all sorts of talent in different parts of the world coming together, right, to ensure that we have the best products for the best price. That is what our standard of living depends on, And the idea that, all of a sudden this can all magically go back to the US, it is an utterly preposterous fantasy. And even if investors were interested in doing this, they're certainly not going to do it when US trade policy seems to change every single day. Because you and I, as business people, what do we value? Well, we value more than anything else certainty. We value stability. We want a business-friendly climate, but we want to know more than anything else what the rules are so that we can build our business undisturbed by government and at best supported by government, but in a way that allows us to make decisions that make sense for our businesses and for our workers and for our communities. And the instability, let me tell you, the bad news is that it is chasing investment and jobs out of North America. It is erasing trillions of dollars of market value, and that is why, for the first time, you're starting to see cracks in the coalition. It's not putting America first, it's more likely putting North America last. So, over the last 2 months, I've had a chance to travel to Washington twice. First time with Premier Ford and the other provincial premiers. The second time, a visit just focused on meeting business leaders. So I've had so many conversations, the US Chamber of Commerce, the president of the Business Roundtable of the US. I've spoken to a member of Mr. Trump's cabinet. I've spoken to a Republican senator. I've spoken to the CEO of every state chamber that borders Ontario. We have 8 states that border Ontario by land or water. And it's interesting because these conversations, most of them, it's kind of like I'm doing a reverse apology tour, right? And so the conversation goes something like this. Where are y'all from? Oh, I'm from Canada, from Ontario, Canada. Oh, I am so sorry. That's what I get. I'm so sorry, Now, some are cautious. They try to rationalize the irrational. They try to excuse the inexcusable, right? Well, the 51st state stuff, it's actually a compliment, is what I hear sometimes, right? Oh, the president certainly has his own unique negotiating style and strategy, Hear that sometimes. They say we agree that we've got to get stability back and that business hates unpredictability. They say we have to resolve our differences. And of course, I'm sitting here, as you probably are too, saying, we didn't have a lot of differences. You decided that we had differences, but okay. And they all want to get to a deal, right? And that's a good thing. There's one very senior US official I spoke to who said, I believe, this administration believes in a safer, stronger, and more prosperous America. And then he went on to say, to me, this includes Canada. And a lot of people in senior leadership positions in Washington feel the same way. To me, it includes Canada. A lot of people, not necessarily everybody, but a lot of people feel the same way. So they're being very careful, right? And the question right now, it's not about America first, it's about whether America will be alone and whether America can afford to be alone. I don't think it can, but we can't be reliant on that. So tomorrow is what the president calls Liberation Day, the day that American consumers will be liberated from their hard-earned cash. But I'm cautiously optimistic that the US and Canada at some stage, and probably Mexico, I hope Mexico too, because we shouldn't be doing this bilaterally, that's a mistake, that we'll come to a deal. But here's what I'd say about that. Unfortunately, the damage is done, and the damage is deep. US products and services in Canada, how many people here, just hands up, are being careful about maybe avoiding American products and buying Canadian? How many people here? Okay, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And the reality is this is a movement that's going right across our country, right? And beyond. And the idea that the reputation harm to US products and services in Canada, that's going to take years and years to repair. And the other problem is that the United States, at least as long as this administration's in office, is likely to be an unstable and unreliable and unpredictable trading partner, right? We have no guarantees that any deal that we sign with this president will be respected because he didn't respect the last one. And so I think our mantra, I'd suggest yours and mine, that it should be control what we can and try to influence the rest. It's the time now to double down on our strengths, and we have so many. It's time to reinforce our resilience and take decisive steps to secure Ontario's future. So let's talk a little bit about the outlook, the starting point, the base that we have right now. And the Ontario Chamber, was delighted to partner, with many stakeholders, including BMO, earlier this year around our Ontario Economic Report, where we looked at where the provincial economy is going, and we also looked at business confidence. Now, why do we care so much about business confidence? Because ultimately, the confidence of people like you and me, as business people, that's what drives investment decisions, and that's what drives employment decisions. So, the good news and bad news, okay? Business confidence in Ontario went up at December. We did the survey in December. It went up to 26%. Now, you're probably sitting there saying, well, that doesn't sound that good. But here's the good news in that. It was double what it was a year earlier. Not surprisingly, right? Interest rates and inflation were so high a year earlier, businesses were very pessimistic. So business confidence doubled, right? Not a bad thing. But here's the problem, right? Things changing so fast in real time. I said to our team, okay, we can't go out in February with December data, given what's just happened in the last 6 weeks. So let's do the survey again. So we did the survey again, the business confidence survey, the week of that infamous Trump-Trudeau phone call, the day after Groundhog Day, right? They had that phone call, right? The tariffs, we've got a 30-day stay on the tariffs, continued uncertainty, but so far the hammer hasn't fallen, right? We asked them that week. Business confidence plunged. It went from 26% to 15%, virtually erasing the gains that we'd made in the preceding year. Before tariffs, Ontario's economic forecast for 2025 forecast 2.1% GDP growth. Now it's anyone's guess, but most economists would say that we'll be somewhere right on the bubble, as to whether we're in recession or not, depending on what the tariffs actually turn out to be and how bad they are. We also asked business people, okay, so will this affect your business? 2/3, 67% said yes, our business would be negatively affected. That's the bad news. The silver lining, 48% of businesses responding to our survey said they believed they could adapt. So a bit of good news, but I'm going to bring you down again because we asked them, how will you adapt? Number one answer is I'm going to raise prices, or try to raise prices, not surprisingly. Number two answer, I'm going to diversify suppliers away from the US. Number three answer, I'm going to reduce my workforce. Now, two of those three things are very bad news for business leaders, for community leaders, for all of us. And so the problem, I think, and the challenge is, how do we become more productive? How do we become more resilient in this environment? And that's why we released on the first day of the Ontario election a platform that we call Ontario Competes. And we mirrored that based on the input of our members right across Ontario last week in the federal election with a platform that we call Ontario's Prosperity, Canada's Progress, because those two things are inextricably linked. And our contention is that this prosperity and our future competitiveness rests on four pillars. Creating a competitive business and trade environment is number one. Number two, creating a skilled and diverse workforce. Number three, healthy and sustainable communities, which, by the way, includes healthy municipalities. And finally, investing in growth-enabling infrastructure. These are the building blocks of Ontario's competitiveness. And there are a few areas in these recommendations I wanted to focus on a little bit today, because we need to focus our asks of government right now. The first one, which you've heard a lot of talk about lately, although we've been talking about it for a very long time, it's the elimination of interprovincial trade barriers, right? We've been talking a lot about that right now. And, there is some good news, right? The federal government has committed to removing, half of its exceptions to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, and actually, the new Prime Minister has proposed to go even further, which is good news. Nova Scotia has tabled mutual recognition legislation, and Ontario proposes to do the same. Now, this is kind of dry stuff. This isn't making headlines in any election, certainly not in Ontario, and certainly not federally. But here's why this is so important. Because if we could bring down these needless barriers, these disruptions to trade across our country, so many good things happen. For consumers, it's more choices, it's lower prices. For businesses, it's access to markets right across the country without having to jump through so many hoops or adapt your products and services, to meet different standards. For workers, it means going where the jobs are. Imagine if we could attract all of the healthcare workers that we needed in Ontario. Certainly, I know a goal of the minister and of so many of you, right? But one reason we have difficulty doing it is because of the need to be relicensed and the barriers and the costs and the red tape involved in recertifying because of different provincial standards and rules. And for government, boy, oh boy, imagine all that extra tax revenue that could be fruitfully deployed to help businesses affected by tariffs or to maintain or enhance services that we value as citizens. Second, we have to protect at-risk industries. And I'll confess to a little bit of anxiety about one topic, right? Tariff relief can't just be sprinkled around the country, like COVID-style cash. This region, 39% of GDP we heard in the last presentation, is dependent on trade. And so it's got to be focused on the regions, the communities, the sectors, the businesses that are going to be most effective. It's an exercise in triage, right? Not in trying to please every constituency across the country, right? Because manufacturing, that's the area that we're particularly worried about, because that's the front end of all of this. And it's like that Bruce Springsteen song, right? Foreman says, these jobs are going, boys, and they ain't coming back to your hometown. We have to protect that footprint. Third, you ask businesses what the most important thing is, their answer is usually the same. Taxes, regulations, the cost of doing business. That's always number one, right? We got to maintain a competitive tax and regulatory environment and pay very close attention to what our peers are doing, to how easy it is to do business on the other side of the border, and to ensure it's just as easy, if not easier, to do business here, given all the other advantages we have. the diversity and talent of our workforce, our healthcare, the other things which make this place so attractive. And so businesses, interestingly though, when you ask them what's their most important priority, it's taxes and cost of business. But then very quickly, they move to things that are essential to their workers and their communities. Number 2 priority of business in the survey, more affordable housing. Number 3 priority, improvements to the healthcare system to ensure that their workers have timely access to quality healthcare. And the next issue that they talk about is their talent pipeline. And that is why we are advocating so strongly for the government in the next budget in Ontario to make a significant investment in post-secondary education. Because it's fair and it's good and it is right that we are talking about subsidizing businesses affected by the tariffs today. But it would be ridiculous and wrong for us to subsidize the present while neglecting the future. And that is why post-secondary education matters. Let's get into the business as a society of being ambitious and trying to attract the very best in the world to come and do their research and their discoveries here in Canada, right? In industries such as life sciences or technology and many others, right? And let's also ensure that we're ensuring that the talent we have here has an opportunity to stay here because there's enrollment that's open in the programs that they want to pursue. Absolutely essential. Finally, infrastructure. And it is so exciting, our regional chair mentioned this, to see significant progress in Brampton and Peel region, including the approval of the Hazel-McCallion LRT, expansion of Brampton GO, the proposed Highway 413. This stuff doesn't happen by accident. This is because all of us work together with our local leaders, our provincial leaders, our federal leaders. We work together to make these things happen. It's exciting too. I see Karen's going to speak to you later from Toronto Pearson. I'm so excited by that transformative vision for economic growth in the region because we already are blessed right here to have Canada's largest industrial employment zone, right? 18,000 jobs, right? Sorry, 18,000 companies, 500,000 jobs. But what's even more exciting is not just what it represents today, it's what it could be tomorrow, right? And how for a nation that aspires to spread its wings and export more and to do business around the world, this hub is so valuable to this region and to this province and to this country. So let's support it. So finally, how do we turn all these ideas into action? And it comes down to, our mission, which is to convene, to mobilize, and to empower business. And there are 2 dimensions of this that are particularly important, right? We launched the Ontario Business and Trade Leadership Coalition, bringing together businesses and industry associations and leaders from the most trade-dependent industries right across Ontario to kind of be a bit of a war room around tariffs and trade today, but more importantly, to provide recommendations to government tomorrow. And let me tell you a little story about that. We formed it back in January, and around the time the provincial election is called, I think it was day 3 of the election, I sent a text to the Premier. As you all know, and you've probably seen him do this before if you've been to these events, he gives people out his mobile, right? But he gets like 1,000 messages every day, right? So anyhow, so I say, I'd really love for you to meet with our coalition. He calls me back in 15 minutes. The meeting with the coalition happened the next day. The next day. And so if there's one thing that makes me optimistic right here, right now, it's that I've never seen more unity among Canadians. I've never seen more engagement from our chambers of commerce and boards of trade and our business community. I've never seen more urgency from our political leaders. And the speed of that callback and that action, that is a sign of that urgency. And I've never seen such a shared determination to turn talk into action. And that's why I think, and I just want to say, it has never been more critical for you to be involved in the Brampton Board of Trade, the Caledon Chamber of Commerce, or any Chamber of Commerce or Board of Trade that you might belong to. And if you're not a member of one now, please join, because we need you. We need your voice, right? And I say this for 3 reasons, just to close. Businesses need to support one another, and we need to learn from one another, right? Whether it's analysis or advice or sharing best practices, or working together on advocacy, right? That is job one, and it's especially job one right now, right? Our chambers and boards of trade, they attract two types of people. People who are leaders in their community today, or people who aspire to be leaders in their communities tomorrow. And if you're involved, that is each and all of you. Second, when we stand together, we are a movement that is incredibly wise for leaders to heed and incredibly foolish for them to ignore, right? And that's because, as I said before, it's not big business, it's not small business, it's all business in every sector, in every community, right? Together we can be powerful. And finally, it's about leadership. It's not just about representing what business wants and needs today. It is about thinking about the needs and the aspirations and the opportunities for businesses and workers and communities tomorrow. That's what we need to thrive in the future. So it's easy to look around the world, look at the world around us and feel anxiety. But we can feel more than one emotion at a time. And we can also feel optimism, which I absolutely do. Let's not make any mistakes here. I mean, these times are going to test us. They'll test our resolve, they'll test our relationships, they'll test our courage, they'll test our conviction. But the great news is that Peel Region businesses and Ontario businesses have the resources and the talent and the determination to lead. So let's not let these challenges define us. Instead, let's work together to define the solutions. It's easy to see uncertainty, but when we look closely, we have an extraordinary opportunity. When all is uncertain, anything is possible. So my last bit of advice to you is together, let's make prosperity possible. Thank you so much.